Okay, I don't know if that's going to register yet. Not yet. Dee. We'll fix this up. Okay, I hadn't turned on my USB device that makes this all work. So, okay, hello Elephant, one of our new chat members, and Connie, hello Connie. Okay, yeah, it took me a little bit. I just I think I'm a little bit otherworldly tonight, but I should be, if I use the title that came to me, should enable me to stay somewhat on track. I really, I'll get, wait, no, there's 9 people here, so I just, one of the most important things I would like to do at the beginning of this stream is to offer a very warm welcome to everyone who is here. A warm welcome. Of that. Actually, I had some beautiful night sounds outside tonight with the crickets and cicadas, but down, just a couple of houses down, there were a few dogs. Like 2 on one side of the street, 1 on one side of the street. One barks, they all bark, and my microphone picks that up as well. Greetings, Lee Veltman. So, in case you weren't here, Lee, I wanted to extend warm greetings to all. Emphasis on warm. I want this to be a very welcoming stream when it's on, generally Monday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Well, expanding the process, it's, we all have our styles. Every single one of us who does live streams has a unique style, and so I'm glad that you're here to kind of get an eye, be there. I always do this at 9, so the fact that, there's another live stream on within our neighborhood, I think it's, it all works out well. It is. Again, they're different, and this way here, it's kind of like the neighborhood has more than one restaurant or bar to go to. I would call that abundance. And abundance is actually, I think, a topic that just occurred to me because it would be a good place to begin the kind of philosophical riffing that I like to do. In my years of speaking and being paid for my speaking, I would never quite consider it as a teacher. I kind of do lectures in my own typical Aspie style, so that means they're kind of a little bit of entertainment mixed in. And I'm certain in those kind of lecturing formats, I'm certainly offering lots of information that is being shared, which is another form of teaching. But there are some teachers, some who've left the scene and some are still on the scene, that I really I consider, no, that's what a teacher is. In every formal sense of the word. But anyway, Jason Louv, somebody who was on a recent Nox Mente, but he had on a guest that I had never heard of before, and he's something Flowers, if I recall, is his last name, or maybe Flowers is his middle name. If you go to Jason Louve's site, it's only a couple of videos old. I also watched a video on white magic versus black magic, and in many ways that's almost a bait, almost. I mean, I think it was good that he did it, but it's kind of like clickbait, because when he really gets in there very quickly, he busts that this is, you know, that amongst magicians there's magicians, and you know, some just people, and you have people who kind of, you know, contribute to the community, and then you have some others who are just spiteful. But that's not at all what this is about. What I liked, what I really enjoyed about him, besides the fact that besides the Sophianic map, I find the Norse map of, you know, Yggdrasil an absolutely fun map, and it's a map that if you want to travel it, you will certainly get things from it. You know, again, but as I say, I consider it a secondary map. But anyway, so because he was talking about things, as I am a rune reader, that's, in other words, if I'm going to do divination other than using the animal cards, and I will use the runes and not the tarot. I've certainly worked with tarot. I have some, you know, I mean, when somebody throws out a card, I'm not clueless, although sometimes certain cards, yeah, I am. Because I haven't really undertaken a study, nor did they ever speak to me. The runes talk to me. And I know for real tarot readers, the cards talk to them. They tell them, they give them stories or narratives. They give them something. And since the runes talk to me and the tarot cards don't, I tend to use the runes. So I have some understanding of the psychology and also my own shamanic work with the runes themselves. And what I liked was he presents that, although the Elder Futhark could be used as an alphabet, that was not its primary purpose. That when Odin received the runes, it wasn't as an alphabet. It was as a system for divination and understanding elemental energies. And, you know, even delving in deeper, especially with the let's call them, you know, the space operas or the sky operas of, you know, what, you know, Loki and Thor and Odin going to a party at Giants, all the different things. And including even some Greek myths where, you know, you have the gods acting fairly oafishly very often. But especially in the runic system, where once you get past the personalities and the morality plays of what these gods or, you know, revered ancestors did in the stories, they kind of disappear and become qualities or elemental forces in their own right. And I really liked, you know, what he said, that, you know, the whole purpose of the runes was not as an alphabetic system, but because sounds and names were assigned to them, they could be used as an alphabetic system. And then what I thought was really beautiful, and it's interesting because I've been kind of doing meditations with the yin, what we call the yin yang symbol, and it certainly ties in. The yin yang symbol, I think, is also very great. Probably for the third or fourth time I listened to another tape with Joseph Farrell explaining what you call the topological metaphor, and if you, without, only Joseph himself can explain the typological metaphor in any way that would be of utility. But anyway, but taking that in there, and with the yin yang symbol looking like it's two things, but it's, you know, it's three things. It's the whole and the two parts of a whole, but the whole is still there. So in the yin yang, there's the principle of three, the kind of ancient triune understanding. Now sometimes it gets populated with personalities, but in the topological metaphor there is no personality assignment. It's, you know, once the one splits differentiates any other aspect of itself, it jumps from 1 to 3, because now there's 2 differentiated aspects contained within the original whole. But the language, sometimes the language people use to explain a dynamic is sometimes just so brilliant, and I certainly latched on to something he said because it really allows what looks like polarity to emerge as part of a system of homeostasis. Because somebody had asked him something about good or evil, and he says, or no, not good and evil, just the concept of evil or something. And he says, what manifests as evils are basically one of 2 things: too much or too little. Or the words he used were excess and deficiency. It's really good when you just kind of have those words, excess and deficiency. So in many ways, we could also break it down that, homeostasis or proper balance within certain systems would be that consumption equals production. If production is a little bit above consumption, then you could have, I guess, a surplus, provided that surplus is not burdensome and doesn't create its own aspect, which super excess can create, especially in a natural system. Once you take certain things out of a natural system, abundance looks a lot better than it would in a natural system. But this whole idea of excess or deficiency, and then that beautiful sine wave that goes between these 2 images of what could be opposing, and in many ways, to me, showing that it is balance. It is the middle path between excess and deficiency that is sacred, is good, what we call good, and what even the universe itself would call homeostasis. And homeostasis is not a perfect situation, because systems exist within greater systems. So there will always be perturbations in any given system, which keeps the the flows going, keeps things fresh, and instead of just standing water. So first of all, I immediately, because I'd been doing meditations on the yin yang symbol and appreciating it. If some words came to me that I could share, and I'm doing some of that here, then so be it. But for part of what we do is by all means share what we can. But sometimes the instruction we get is largely explained to us in terms that come to us, and then good luck unpacking it for other parties. But there is some unpacking here. So excess and deficiencies, I thought was just such a wonderful way of kind of taking into concept what we see as a clear symbol in the yin-yang symbol, but so important to remember that sine wave in the middle of the two qualities that seem to be opposing, but in many ways, when you're thinking of qualities, in other words, if something is too cold, you'll want some heat. And if it's too cold, cold is bad. If it's too hot, you'll want some cool. Now heat is bad. So what really needs to be seen when looking at the yin and yang symbol is not to assign any good or bad quality to either color. There is excess, and the excess and deficiency is kind of like, just like our body, using our body as the yin-yang symbol in its totality. if you are in danger of hypothermia if you don't have enough heat, and your body's ability to keep the inside of your body at basically 100 degrees minus 1.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Then you'll need heat. There's a deficiency of heat. Similarly, you can have an excess of heat. So it is to be seen. It's these to be seen. To see the yin yang is actually in many ways the way, and we are an embodiment of the way. And that Pam has her ways. For the concept of Tao and the planetary animal mother, as opposed to laws and having ways instead of laws, there's a wholesome way. There's a wholesome Tao, and then and that's where there is no deficiency or excess, where it can be avoided. And so excess or deficiency. I just really like that. It was in a Jason Louv video, and I'm not subscribed, so I can't look at my subscriptions and catch up the name. But I did. Yeah, and Jason Louv did thing on white versus black magic. A very catchy thumbnail too. Uses a white cat and a black cat. Hello, Blue Blood. Hello, MC Windsor. I had missed greeting you. Yeah. That was a bunch of adjustments in my lower thoracic spine. And that felt really good. Any up here? Let's see. Any up here? Apparently not. So, a look at the thumbs up and thumbs down for last week is interesting. Enough said on that. Well said, Elephant. Hello, Puppet Uninterrupted. So, unlike last week, I didn't have to have a stash of cigarettes to get me through. Maybe that's why maybe people were thumbs downing my smoking. I actually thought last week's was relatively. I think, who knows? I can't. They bleed into each other. Who knows? Maybe I was a crazed man. And so where do I want to go? Well, I think so. My title tonight came from inner and outer inspirations, and once they are put together, it doesn't matter which is which, because it's kind of about what it is. It's the same thing. So we have rain, sun, ponds, and springs. Black lights are fun. They're really setups for metaphors, and hopefully instructive metaphors. That's the intention. And one of the intentions also is I never intend to offend. I don't give offense. But just because something isn't given doesn't mean it can't be taken. And we have words for taking what has not been given. But we won't go there, will we? So what do I have here? I've written a few things. Maybe too early for some of them. And who knows, they might, just now as I look at them, go, you're in a slightly better mood than when you wrote those down. Been quite a lot going on with our planet, with our Earth. Let's just use I want to use the word Earth, because one of the things that's in common with round and flat Earth is Earth. We both agree there's an Earth. So, and that's what matters to the Telestai, the Earth, and what's going on this Earth, with this Earth. And being able to see pathogens, which when they take on bodies, we tend to call psychopaths. We could call them psychopathogens because they have a psyche, but they're pathogens nonetheless. And so anyway, whether I was catching elephant's uniquely feminine comment. Hello there, Suzanne. Or should I say hi? Usually how I use the word I'm greeted with. Hi, Suzanne. Lee, you're building a fan base. And that's said with love. So, rain, sun. I was part of the reason I was kind of inspired to use very nature-based metaphors to expound upon. Was me just being outside so constantly. Even mowing a large portion of my lawn, but leaving a huge patch for the insects and nature spirits to have to their own, and know that I won't be messing with them there until winter closes the show down. Winters. Something very unique to the anthropos living in the north that is not really shared so much, at least in that way, in more equatorial regions of the planet or of the earth. And oh man, I'm sitting here reading the chat too, and I'm enjoying the chat actually. Yeah, well, yes, I am very. Nature is where we arise. So returning to our roots and our natural home, not only for our body but for our psyches. Because, especially as a telestic or a gnostic, call it what you will, there is a consciousness with our earth that is there to be communicated with and interacted with. And although I do it in my bed and behind, plasterboard walls, there's so much more out there, because not only is she there, there's also the elementals, and I have a little garden, and I have some wild herbs. They all have their attendant, or their own, like, kind of specialized elementals. And then there's the actual deva of the plant. And sometimes I do not commune very well with it. I don't sit down. I'm kind of like, being busy, doing things, attending to things, including watering. And instead of just, but I have made it a point I'm going to sit down and communicate with some of the things I've planted in my garden beyond the kind of cursory information I was getting, as they're going in there. But I really want, if you are familiar with the, where's that place in Scotland? Probably have. I'm thinking Finland. That's not it. Maybe somebody will put it in there. It starts with it. Findhorn. Findhorn was a place where a bunch of kind of early New Age people. The early New Age was before it became a meme, and there was real. There was more authenticity in what people could do. It was like the people who had talents that wouldn't be accepted in regular society applied their talents, and those who realized that those talents could be put to work would put people like that to do certain things. They would build teams. Certain people had the ability to have that kind of communication. Other people had more administrative skills, and they all came together and they built an amazing place called Findhorn. And before Findhorn became very popular, it was an amazing place. And then it became a destination. And then, of course, the degraded New Age types found out about it, where, well, it's a shadow of itself. And, but anyway, their big thing was communicating with the elementals, and in this case would be more the kind of the personalized elementals that work in that area, like almost elementals that are, you could say, almost like miniature embodiments of the greater elements, which are earth, air, fire, and water. I'm aware of the ether, but it doesn't play in. The ether is actually its own conversation. And I'm just going to go into my own screen just for a moment. It's because actually, and in this case, it's because it's the live chat has such beauty in it, and such a good feeling that if I'm going to be productive, I might need to try and I make no claims at multitasking. Playing bass guitar and singing a song is at the epitome of my multitasking, and largely because I program one or the other. I either program the singing or I program the bass playing, and then the other one is live. One is muscle memory performance, and the other one is in real time. So elementals. So and this is kind of expanding the process. Said something. So yeah, Earth has been my sanity, but it's also, I don't get all my communication outside. But when I also get communication in bed when I send myself out, set myself up for journeys, and then journeys happen or they don't. Not to be confused with astral travel at all. I mean, there's astral travel and journeying in that shamanic space are very different, and one's a heck of a lot safer. So being outside has become really, really crucial. It's also where yesterday I don't know how many hours I spent in my bare feet, including mowing my lawn. I came in with the dark greenest feet I've ever seen on myself. They were just soaked in chlorophyll. So I really, nature, and we're in some very interesting times in both the macro and the micro, in the world at large, and then especially in the micro, I'm going to refer to more as the cyber world. I was really, some friends came to visit me yesterday, and they brought me supplies, helped me with, my rent. And then even when there was a few things I went to go to get on my own store, and he came inside with me, and he insisted to pay for it. We tried to look for chili powder so I could make my chili soup, but the jar was empty. But just, and then, taking me out to lunch, and I was able to help him with a health issue that he had asked the doctor a certain question about a causality, and I suggested a causality to him. And this is a man who has considerable, as a psychologist, or maybe even a psychiatrist, he worked for the Navy, I believe. I mean, this is a guy with a really good intellect, and so I shared with him a causality, especially since he is one of the two types of diabetics. And so when he was mentioning certain macular that were, eye degeneration, I had some ideas to offer him, which made kind of perfect sense to him. So I was really, and I just told them I was so glad that after so much they had given me, that I had something to give them, which they reminded me, no, your presence is what, we love you, we're here for you, and we enjoy the conversations we have, and the person that you are. And they have to, and they never can stay that long, because they know that I need to sleep till at least around noon. So they leave their house at 9. It's a 3-hour drive here, and then they want to get back before dark. So it's around 4:30. So we have a few hours together, and they spend more time traveling than they do with me. Amazing, just amazing. The friends that I have and have had, and including some cyber friends, but cyber brothers and sisters. And so anyway, that brings me back to warm greetings. One of the things I got from being outside, especially in a I was experiencing a little being morose of sorts. Part of, sometimes part of having a few winters under one's belt, and been there, done that type of stuff. So when one gets in that place, and in my case, I'll say when somebody like myself gets in that place, I really want to look for the chink in that attitude. Some way, and even if the rest, the whole fence stays up, that there's a gateway, and something that can be done. Some way, some path to maintaining engagement, and one that fits logic, life experience, wisdom, and that one can put some emotional content into it, because without that, it's Memorex. So, since I do feel a love for the human animal, the human species, I can focus on that. And then and then also concepts of point of origins, where in an ecosystem, which would be, an ecosystem is a system that is natural instead of contrived. At least we find ecosystems natural. I do believe that wisdom can inform our very capable human animal of adjustments that can be made that are even improvement on the wisdom and simplicity of the construction, but by our introducing our agency into it, it allows for a little more complexity, in certain cases even aesthetic. So in a natural ecosystem, you'll have, creeks, rivers, springs. Now, a spring is where water comes out of the earth and then begins, whether or not it's going to feed a stream, possibly be of enough volume to be its own humble stream. And in almost all cases, if you see water coming out of the earth, it's drinkable. Unless they're fracking in your area, then you might need to worry. Fracking is an ecological disaster, and it has nothing to do with earthquakes. Loss of life and property is to be rude, but loss of an aquifer is unacceptable. There are many people depending on that mother's milk that has been stored there. So springs. So there are springs, and again, in a natural ecosystem, we'll keep it natural now. This way, I won't get sidetracked with that kind of commentary like fracking. So in a natural ecosystem, it is known that any water coming out of the earth is drinkable. It is safe to drink. Once upon a time, before people of various books arrived on the shore, for now, and they happen to be from Europe. But being European wasn't the problem. The fact that they were following certain texts are what allowed for the righteous genocide of native people and the appropriation of their land. So in that natural setting, before the haters of nature arrived, almost any, it was generally said, any moving water, maybe with the exception of large rivers, but even then, certainly safe to swim in, but any moving water was drinkable. And the reason why is that the culture that held the earth as sacred. Streams were sacred. The names given often were personality names. The setting was one of animism. The world is alive, and the things around us are alive, and they have their own experience. And in essence, they form at least a rudimentary personality, an integrity and a certain pleasure in what they provide to the environment. And in many cases, stones bearing witness. So it was a natural world. And you could drink from springs or any running water, but you wouldn't drink from a pond. Is there anything wrong with a pond? Absolutely not. It's not potable water. A pond is a unique ecosystem, supports lots of life. Once again, there's absolutely nothing wrong with a pond other than as a source of drinking water. And generally what typifies a pond is either sluggish water renewal or no water renewal. In other words, it's either thoroughly stagnant or stagnation is in excess to flow. But it's still a very productive place. Well, one of the things it produces is mosquitoes, but fortunately it produces frogs that love to eat them. The polywogs or tadpoles of frogs and toads, but we'll speak about frogs, love the larvae of mosquitoes. So here you have at one level the young eat the young of the mosquito, and the large eat the adults eat the adults. There's a nice balance there. But you know, the mosquitoes, they can't eat all mosquitoes or their food source would run out. So there's plenty of mosquitoes by ponds. And the sound of frogs croaking at a pond, especially the big old harumphs of a bullfrog, magical. Because when I had my tent at Omega, I was close enough to one of our ponds to be able to hear, especially the harumphing of the bullfrogs. That kind of sound they make. I loved it. So, and if one were to decide to camp by a pond, they would probably put up more mosquitoes than if they had camped by a river. The absence of mosquitoes in the natural environment, pretty rare, unless you have a good breeze blowing. If you don't want to have to carry water, it'd be wise to camp by a stream instead of by a pond, because you have a constant source of water as you needed it. You pee on the ground, you poop on the ground. If you want to bury it, bury it. But again, flies in nature will know what to do with that. Putting it into drinkable water, if nobody should need to be told that. At least nobody arising in nature, and or at least somebody arising with supervision in nature. Although I can't even imagine, Jungle Boy didn't know that. So I think I'll follow in that metaphor, but I want to. I've been out of the chat now for a while, and I want to see who has joined us. I might need to warmly greet someone. All right. Anybody I haven't greeted? Probably not. The numbers haven't grown very much. Oh, any among us? Hello. Warm greetings. Okay. Looks like I'm all caught up. Oh, Vernon. Hello. Vernon. Kiora. Came in just in time at your entry and to be able to greet you. Vernon is somebody I've had multiple face-to-face conversations with, and somebody I consider a brother, and another one who understands nature, Mama, her ways, her communications, because we can share communications also, and that's another thing that happens with other people I keep contact with, and who embrace the Earth narrative. Again, it might not be quite the Sophianic narrative, but they're actually conversing with her directly. So there's only one her. Although in her dakinis, there are expressions of her in different ways. But then there's just Vivi herself, the planetary animal mother, and she is there for everybody to get acquainted. I don't know how to recommend it any more than the life on this earth shifts once that connection is made in a very rich and rewarding way from not only my experience, everybody else who's done it, everybody else who's made that connection, gotten that communication going. It's actually the confirmation. How do you know what it is? Well, how come all of us coming from separate places are kind of coming with the same intel? Because the intel is coming from a source, the consciousness of this earth, the wisdom. And Sophia means wisdom, or Sophia means wisdom. So part of my guidance for continuing to do live streams that have a purpose, and they have a purpose, is that kind of, going to keep it telistic, that is aimed, planetary animal mother inspired. And because it's its own frequency band, its own spectrum with discrete information, and there are not many sources for it. I mean, the spring, I am a tributary. The spring of the source, at least the one that I can find, is John Lamb Lash. Who has turned into a very controversial person, because when people listen to one part of what he has to say without everything else, and they get mad at the messenger, so therefore whatever the message is, we have to ignore it because the messenger is despicable in their opinion. So I have had guidance that there's so few sources of this particular spring that and especially given that the main spring is in the forbidden land for many people, then there needs to be a spring, a tributary from that source. So that's kind of, and the inspiration, so the inspiration is to continue to be a tributary of mother's milk, what I would consider spring water, but from a specific spring. This way here we are not saying there are not other springs. This is call it the Gnostic spring. But I do have a problem with the word Gnostic, because the word Gnostic is a pejorative. For those who are limited to conversational English, that would be an insult. Similarly, the word pagan is an insult. An insult levied and used from the Olympian god-worshipping Romans for the people who did not locate their deities in the planets in the sky, but located their deities in the earth. So to the Olympian, to the ones who held the Olympians as that mythos, those who held the earth and her beings and her emanations as being where they would pay their attention and their veneration, some love. So it was what now the Christians would certainly call the Olympian worshipping Romans pagans, but the word pagan was coined by the Olympian worshipping Romans for the earth worshipping Pagani, the Hicks, the hillbillies. Similarly, in Anglo-Saxon, you get the word heathen. They weren't participating in the certain narratives. They were getting their information straight from the elementals and from the earth, as they had done for thousands of years to time immemorial. So the word pagan, the word heathen, and the word Gnostic are all pejorative terms hurled at the people who kept, and the one thing they all have in common is earth veneration, earth reverence, earth-based animistic identification where they source themselves. Yeah, I'm not sure you were here because it was early on when I kind of that labels can be troubling, but also the more rudimentary the cognitive abilities of a person, the more labels become problematic. When labels can be pregnant with the many meanings, they're not as problematic. But being as we're dealing with people in general with varying capacities of cognition, they certainly are problematical, but language can be problematical also, especially English. And the language, because it comes from Anglish, basically English is the language of the angels, and angels have different meanings to different, from where people will source their mythos, their origin. One group of people hold angels in quite high regard. Another group of people, well, they don't have any use for angels, let's put it that way. So my inspiration is to be unapologetically telestic. That would be aimed at the Earth narrative that I share with other people in an Earth narrative, the one that I can check, the one that we verify through coming back with the same basic intel, and because that allows for a cohesive magical space. It allows for a magical community where there is, again, there's a coherence. The word cohesion and coherence have the kind of same meaning. All the galaxies are based in their spirals because there's a coherence in the center. They're galactic centers. And so there is more coherence when there is a shared intel, a shared commonality in our magical space. The other thing about the earth-based belief systems or experience systems, because again, these people experience this. They were born into an ecosystem, and so that is the system that they knew from birth. And then there were other systems that are fictions, and that would be, certain worship and magical systems. And again, I have to be really clear because I have to, from my Gnostic seat, I do have to address systems. Systems are not people. Systems are the things that suck people up. And then sometimes and we'll confuse them thinking that they are the system when that doesn't work that way. So I just want to be really clear that knocking a system is not to knock a practitioner. And even when it sounds like I'm knocking, it's just, I'm speaking my observations and trying to address disunity. Especially in the magical space. Especially in that space. But one of the things that the animistic based people have in common is there's no judgment post-life. There's ancestors, and they might give you a load of shit about yourself. I mean, in the traditional things, and the generations, each unique line was kept, and if you screwed up, the story, if you added, like this is their stream, this is their genetic stream kept in story, and if you turn out to be an asshole and corrupt that stream, when you get to the other side, I'm quite sure you will have some discontent spirits to deal with, but it's hardly, it's not like it's not like having your heart weighed on a scale and being fed to a crocodile if your heart is too heavy against a feather. I mean, no, there's no St. Peter's, again, the systems, them, and they're all, again, so the real big difference is judgment versus an afterlife, which is a continuation of life. Different environment, but life goes on. Oh, hello, Genevieve. And just so anybody else, if it's like, oh, you're knocking my system, it's a system. It's not personal. Once again, no offense is given. But I mean, if somebody had invented a system, I guess in many ways one could say Crowley invented Thelema. So while he was alive, if one were to knock Thelema, well, then Crowley could be properly considered himself insulted. And that, to me, it is an author's right to feel, if you attack an author's work, especially while they're still alive, you have issued a challenge. But if you're not the author of a work and somebody criticizes that work, it's not a challenge to that person. It's not, they don't have the, they didn't author it, so there's no way that there can be any, by going after a body of work, that anybody who happens to like that body of work should not take any of the, the arrows and say, no, you shot that arrow at me too. No, didn't do that. And I've visited and spent time with just about every system. The only thing I never did, because it really seemed, it was so anti-earth magic for me, was the protective circle. I have never engaged in any kind of, especially, earth magic, working with the elementals, that I needed to protect myself. These are my minimally acquaintances, and to me the good work is you befriend them. You become familiar with them, and you know what they need to do, so when you do ask for favors, or in certain cases maybe even command it, it's done from an acquaintance, and in many cases a friendship. Yeah, black does suit me. Black suits a lot of people, which is why it often gets so popular. But first of all, it's a short sleeve shirt, and I need a short sleeve. It's deliciously warm here tonight, and I didn't want the overhead fan, in which case I could have put on a long sleeve shirt. And it also, when I chose my color shirt, it was fitting the mood that I had been in. But I managed to really, well, just before I went live, I kind of did my candle and incense stuff. The incense has to be redone. And, you know, with meditation, prayer, you know, communication, call it what you will. Yeah, just did a few things because I was like, man, this is a rough way to get in front of a camera. Unfortunately, but it was the warm greetings that I was instructed to even write down so I didn't forget it, because that would put me in my heart, and from there, once you're in your heart, usually you'll stay there for a good while. I was a little bit more in my second and third chakra because I was thinking about things, and I didn't want just the wisdom. I wanted to know be very clear on how I felt about things. So that meant I actually had to get into my third chakra and in that kind of mental space and have a conversation with my second chakra and find out how I felt about concepts that were knocking themselves around in my head. And once I kind of was clear on how I felt, then I could go into my heart and say, okay, what's the, where's the wisdom here? And of course, wisdom always has its compassion, because wisdom and compassion are synonymous, in my opinion. I like the pastel colors because they feed my aura. I mean, I'm pumping that blue-green in for a reason. I'm not really making fashion statements. I'm making magical statements. But I do know that black is a striking color for me, especially because the black goes with all this white and gray or whatever it is. It's a good contrast. So I'm aware of that, but that's I don't it's not that I ignore all presentation, nor that I have anything wrong with indulging in a little playful vanity. But this really was, I kind of, there was a certain, and if any way, we could call it going into the earth side of things. On the yin-yang side, the earth side would be what would be considered the black in the yin and yang. Which is why the best way to even consider yin-yang is not in terms of good or bad or those kind of things, but in excess or deficiency. It was the most brilliant thing I'd ever heard anybody said, and it was this kind of Norse runic guy, something flowers. Apparently, he actually was on Aeon Gnostic Bites about a month ago, maybe 3 weeks ago. And I guess for some reason what Jason Louv got out of him was much more meaningful, a lot more scholarly in many ways. Hello, Julie Holland. And then he laid that gem on about the difference between deficiency and excess, and that because he was asked to define evil. And he said the evils are a deficiency and excess. And I went, oh, is that gorgeous? I mean, there's more nuance, but when the general symbol of something like a yin-yang is a macro symbol, and the nuance comes out in the the meditation at different micro levels, while holding the macro, kind of connecting the inner with the outer. I don't like above and below, because again, above is a hit to me is hidden code for heaven, and that's why it's in so above. So rather, in many ways, it's like so within, so without. At the micro, so at the macro. Because what we want from any of our symbols is for the wisdom to be communicated to us. So one of the titles is Blacklights Are Fun. I think it might be, just, since I'm on a topic of light, just very briefly, one of the things that was identified, the works of Plato, we're told are Plato. There's no originals. If you've watched any New Earth, you're aware of the Scaligerian and various other monk schools who did translations and corrections of ancient texts. And so who knows if the Plato we get is in fact Plato, or if it's Plato, is it really all that he had to say? But one of the errors that kind of, he claims to be an initiate of the mystery schools. And one of the secrets that has been let out, and it has come via the Gnostic teacher, is the experience, the ultimate experience, the brew they made from either a form of rye or wheat that had ergot in it, and then other herbs. So it would be like a lightly alcoholic, but ergot is where the LSD, lysergic acid, comes from. So their mystery ritual, the initiation, did involve the taking of that brew. And generally speaking, if the initiation was preceded, there was an experience all initiates had. And it kind of first of all confirmed everybody had the same experience, and also would indicate whether or not one had truly completed the initiation. The night vern. And that was called the organic white light. And this is a light, besides being kind of cool, because think of it as a thicker than usual ectoplasm, as they used to say in the old seances. You'd have like this kind of mist. Well, this has a lot more stuff to it. And the thing about the organic light of the planetary animal mother, when she reveals herself in these initiations, is it casts no shadow. It is a light, but it is in many ways a contained light, so therefore there won't be anything to cast a shadow from this light. It is light itself, as opposed to sunlight, which has a photon stream and will create shadows. At least in our atmosphere it does. So the fact that Plato used Plato's cave, which is based on shadows of torchlight, would be a very strange metaphor for an initiate of the organic light to make. So, although Plato's credited with being an Eleusinian mystery initiate, there seems to be a little, maybe a little padding of the resume there. So black light. So anyway, that's the organic light. Now there's the kind of light that we get from the sun. Good stuff. And within the visible spectrum, we go generally from red to ultraviolet, and then just before we come into the visible, you have infrared, and just as you're going out of the violet spectrum of our visible, you go into ultraviolet. Okay, and then there's it's along a spectrum. The spectrum that we perceive. So I once had a chart, and I don't know what I did with it, about how many different frequencies there are. If you had the equipment to perceive them, what you would see, and just how little we're able to perceive with our eyes and our ears. Our sense of smell is probably much broader than we think. So there's the visible light spectrum. And before it's diffused, which is what a prism did, it kind of can be called white light, or the ambient light that the sun puts out. And I know for somebody like myself, I often have to put on reading glasses, but that's because I'm indoors. There's almost never a case when I'm outdoors that I actually need reading glasses. It would have to be really tiny print. But even here, often I'll put on reading glasses to read, regular size script. I might be able to say it, but I might miss it. Out in the real sunlight, I have no need for reading glasses. There is sufficient light for me to actually see what's before me with my own natural eyesight. So obviously, once I come inside, it's not quite full spectrum light. And also, there is nowhere near the lumens available that one gets outside. Lumens are light intensity. And but we've all experimented. I've had orange lights and and red lights, all the different lights. But then again, now what was absolutely the most fun light of all? A black light. Black light's an interesting light because actually there are certain things, like let's say maybe looking at certain biological samples, maybe even looking at what's in plasma, certain things that might even be invisible under a black light are suddenly there. If one has dry or ashy skin, it shows up a lot more under a black light than it does under regular light. Similarly, certain things that in regular light are, seem to have no standout qualities other than whatever the color is, under a black light, certain colors just pop out with a life of their own. So the black light is, one of the kind of edge of visible, invisible light spectrums that we have the technology to create, and it can create wonderful effects. It kind of, it puts us in a situation of non-regular light that makes things look different. So that's a different perspective, and different perspectives are very useful, if minimally, because it's another data set. Please give me 1 second. And so, hello Sam Webster and Lita Blue. So, so more data, different setting. It changes our perception. Different perception is a new data stream, something to put on a shelf or whatever. Maybe to integrate. But similarly, for most of the things that we would be doing in our day-to-day lives, to operate under black light conditions would probably not be optimal. We also know that there were seems to be certain bands, at least in certain fluorescent lights, that are not the most health promoting. So not all light is wholesome. But once again, I love the charm of a swamp. I love the sounds emanating from a swamp. But certainly around sundown, I probably want to get out of there, unless I just really feel like feeding a group of mosquitoes, a blood donation to the parasites. And also I might get thirsty, and I certainly can't drink from a pond. So I'm trying to put all of this in very holistic ecosystem metaphors. Similarly, as with an ecosystem, there is no good or bad in an ecosystem. Each has its place. But once again, if you were to send somebody out to bring some water for dinner, you wouldn't want them bringing back palm water. Well, you could boil it, I guess. So, so I think, like for me, and like I'm going to, since magic has definitely been part of the many conversations, and if you have something to say about magic, say it. And in many places, it kind of like when I was Omega, they had some really, really good solid food, and they also had some entrees that I didn't think were where I was going to go. I didn't consider them as healthy as others, but there was something there for everybody, and people made choices. And that was really interesting because I sat by the front door and I saw people, in certain cases, waddling in, and I would see all the really healthy choices that could be made, and I saw some like food choices that were like, that's absolutely the last thing you want to put on your plate. And following the people, and I would see that the last thing that should be on their plate has got double helpings. Data. Observations. Good night, Lee. And the other thing I kind of got from spending my time in nature was because I was, again, whenever there is unnecessary drama of any sort, I start to die energetically. Especially in an electronic medium. I just got visited by people who adored me, and hugged me, and brought me food, and gave me money, and took me shopping, and bought me lunch, and just, and then there might be somebody saying less than kind things, or just not even. Again, it's not. I really don't take much of this I don't personally take too much of this personally. this medium isn't the real world. You know, it's the cyber world. It begins to take on real world when we use the technology and do face-to-face meetings, voice, you know, and sometimes where you can communicate just by making a face. No words need to be said. That's communication. And then also in those spaces, an amazing amount of real-world assistance does get transmitted, because there is the mail system and a few other systems. So again, you know, distance doesn't preclude intimacy. So between real-world intimacy and cyber intimacy, then there's also just the cyber silliness. And when one has the option to put their bare feet on a delicious lawn and just look at their garden, cyber silliness, well, to engage is on me. To engage in cyber silliness, so that's why, you know, I don't make a big deal of it, because if I did, then I'd have to blame myself for taking it overly seriously. So the serious thing is for me to generally love the people who show up here, and anybody who watches, tunes in and watches a part or all of these streams once they're no longer live. And in my own definition, and then a definition within a definition of people I have, but I call intimate. By intimate, obviously, we're talking about, you know, that exchange of deep information, nakedness in every sense of the word. So I find myself in the place of being urged both from the inner and outer parts of my being to be, you know, a source of what? How do I want to? What word do I want to use? A source of just something that is markedly different. And, you know, bringing the value of the winters I've been through to hope that that can benefit everybody. And that's what I'm guided to do. And the joy of really working with the elementals in a way that one needs not to invoke them. The communications I get from the multi-levels of communications I get everywhere from the planetary animal mother to the greater elementals, to the smaller ones that are kind of in your garden, whatever. They will speak to me upon connecting with them. And there's no need for me to call them out of their ethers into some more corporeal existence for me to get what I need from them, because I don't need them to go, you know, find me a girlfriend, or, you know, I don't have any task for them other than what they're already at and what I might ask of them to assist in what they're already doing. So there's another difference kind of between, you know, the systems and earth magic is no need for protection. We call in the sacred circle, just like any other magician would, you know, greet the earth, the water, air, and fire in their directions. Certain systems don't have all the. They sometimes will change what it is, but generally the Earth will be in the north. Generally, the system I work within, Earth will be in the north, air will be in the east, fire in the south, and water in the west. Something that is reflected within the tarot. Thank you, Sam. And so, you know, again, you know, call in the circles and then get your communications going, and you might get instruction from them, and or you might ask them to do something that is not, you know, like was they already have their patterns. You might be asking them to something that kind of interrupts their patterns, but when you have good relationships, it's like, yeah, we can do that. Yeah, we can do that. And then also, you know, none of us can command or demand respect from another human. Either we get it or we don't. And there's communications, and whether it's given or not given. But you know, again, respect can only be given. It cannot be demanded nor commanded. And you know, just one of my last communications were, you know, again about me keeping my energy up during some very potential energy sucking times. And it was just like there'll be no energy from Pam for pursuits of my vanity. That either, you know, if I want to be supported, it has to be from her guidance. And part of her guidance was to always greet people very warmly. And that's how I was actually able to transition. I was in a funky place. But once it was greeting time, that warmth, that genuine warmth, opened, you know, put me in my heart space. Hello, Christian Martin. And once one is in their heart space, you know, you might wobble out a little bit, but chances are you won't get more hits than misses. So rain and sun. One of the oddest things, sometimes when I used to watch like the Weather Channel before it went politically correct, before it started having its own shows instead of just giving us the weather. You're welcome, Elephant. Thank you. But, oh yeah, how every once in a while, if a place was like parched dry, well then the rain wasn't necessarily a downer, but it just kind of, how very often rain was this intrusion on our good time. Rain as an inconvenience. We get back to the beginning. Rain in a deficiency is not a good thing, and rain in excess is not a good thing. But rain as a concept is part of the ecosystem. Water that's pulled out, but largely out of the oceans, but from other sources, but huge portions out of the salty oceans, distilled into fresh water, cleansed by sunlight, and then re-released upon the earth. And the water that lands on the land is fresh, clean water. Again, we're talking about in a natural ecosystem. We're not talking about current world fuckeries. So, one can, just because one provides rain, and that's the other thing is, very often much of the news is reported to people living in cities. The majority of the population now live in cities where rain is only an inconvenience because they're removed from nature. They get their water out of taps, not streams. Even if the water comes from a reservoir, the only time they really care is when they hear that the reservoirs are growing lower and there might be water rationing. Oh, now rain's a good thing. The cities have really completely removed people from even a concept of a natural setting. And the media reflects that. Even the Discovery Channel, when it covers nature, how many things about nature don't really leave the average city-dwelling person glad that they live in the city, away from all those spiders that they might have seen, or the snakes that were portrayed, or the lions. In many ways, the nature is kind of, they show you some beauty, but they kind of leave you almost like really glad you're not in the middle of it. But that, again, it's programming for people who are disconnected from nature. And I can't remember the last time that I watched anything from the Discovery or the channel that there isn't some plug for anthropogenic climate change. And again, it's always about hot or cold, not rivers that are so polluted. Not only can you not drink from them, they might rip your skin off if you tried to bathe in them. How many years of leaded gasoline that now if you like in the old days, you could have a rough clay vessel that wasn't glazed and still drink safely out of it. Now, even if you have a crack in your glazing, you can get lead poisoning from ceramic ware. That was from however many decades they put lead into gasoline. That's that one thing alone. So all the clay, at least in every place where cars were, and probably still trace amounts in other places, have rendered what was once inert and safe to use as a drinking vessel into something that can cause brain damage. That was certainly anthropogenic, but that's not what they're discussing in these nature channels. They're not discussing this, like, once again, water that's more like battery acid. Never mind not drinkable. Air that creates, asthmatic conditions. An earth that you can no longer use, the clay in it unless you protect yourself with a glazing, or else you'll get brain damage. These are not the conversations they have when they're talking about anthropogenic problems. No, it's carbon dioxide, what the plants use. And if carbon dioxide was so important, they wouldn't be cutting down the Amazon rainforest, would they now? They would say, this is an absolute emergency. We must leave every tree standing because they're the only thing between us and the incineration of the world due to CO2 and global warming. It doesn't work logically. But the schools haven't taught people to think logically anymore. They teach them the answers to questions they're going to ask them. And even if the answer doesn't make logical sense, like, one of the questions, and they've had it, who shot JFK? The correct answer is Lee Harvey Oswald. There's no questioning. The correct answer is Lee Harvey Oswald. Or you're wrong. You really think that prepares somebody to go out into the world and think for themselves? Unless you are aware right at that position that you're playing a game. Unless you know as you check off, oh yeah, Lee Harvey Oswald. Yeah, there's your answer. It's the answer you want. And since we're playing a game, and since I'm smarter than you, I can play this game. The whole thing is to get the right mark on the test, not prove anything. Matter of fact, if I identify myself as an independent thinker, I might get looked at with a little more scrutiny. I like stealth. Certain times stealth won't work, but especially against the ways of the world, the archontic system, and AI, stealth is amazingly effective. Yeah, I mean, if the Science Channel and the Weather Channel were offering serious science, they wanted to at least logically hold the line, they would say, "Oh, CO2 is such a problem. We must stop all of this deforestation immediately. We must grow hemp so that we can make our paper of every sort from that, including toilet paper." And once again, cutting down a tree to wipe our ass, that is a little bit, when you have hemp. So if they were really serious, if they wanted to be taken, they would at least put that in there, if for no other reason to be taken serious. But nobody's calling them on it. There's no need for them to try and play that card, because everybody's buying the narrative, the ones who buy it. The majority are buying it. It's in everything. I said the Science Channel, nature programs. Oh, here's this little thing, but who knows with anthropogenic climate change whether it'll be around in 20 years. Ooh, bad men and women. Bad human animals, bad human species. Yeah, like we're the ones really doing it. There's a lot of support for it, and the products that we consume and things like that. But that's part of the meditation. That's part of getting tuned into it all. So there were different, they were getting back to light. There were different bands of light. Red is energizing, sometimes to the point of irritability. But generally, it's once again, deficiency or excess. Excessive red energy will make one possibly bellicose. Deficiency of red energy will make one lethargic. Balanced red energy feeds that first chakra well enough that there's energy to run up the rest of the system. Plus there's that unique perspective about our environment, survival, real practical. There's not even any time for how do you feel about it. There's no feeling about it. It's like, do this or die. That's what the red chakra is about. And, in orange, we get into feelings. We're starting to, now things get more interesting. Orange is a complex color. Orange is red and yellow combined. But yet it has its own autonomy as orange. And I'm not going to run through them all. But you can kind of just see each spectrum has a necessity. But is actually meant to be, and the discrete information from each one is a necessity, but they're meant to be stacked. And so generally when you're done stacking, you would have the accumulation of them all, which would be broad spectrum or kind of sunlight. I'm not going to call it white light, although it may be scientifically be called white light, but the kind of light that the sun produces in our atmosphere. In our atmosphere is an important consideration. Because obviously sunlight behaves differently in what we call the darkness of space. Different medium, different behavior of the light that comes away from the sun. But if we want to be holistic, about things. And again, there's a time for for precision and a time for holism with a W, not with an H. Not the holistic with a whole. That is more of a holism. And again, there's that word ism. A fiction pretending to be an organism. But in holistic with a W, the most useful light is the complete light, because it has all the subdivisions within it. And for operating, at least in the waking world, and kind of like, let's call it the working environment world, like building houses or whatever, full spectrum light, as close to the sunlight, is your best, is the best light medium for from a practical point of view. You know, like the different spectrums will give you different results, and they have their own perspective. And sometimes separating one thing out and taking a look and exploring that, which sometimes could cause chakra imbalances. Very, very useful. There's a utility to that precision, that identifying a discrete band and focusing there. And then there's also that black light, the fun of the black light, and even the utility of the black light. And almost a sense of like being in the dream, you know, in the dreaming, or a dreaming, you know, the dream time, I'll call it. You know, turning on a black light really just changes the environment, and it gives us a sense. There's a visibility that's not common to nighttime, and in certain cases, again, there's that, you know, efflorescence that happens with certain colors under a black light. A lot of fun, even utility with you know, identifying certain things that you actually want that light to make shine so you see them better. And as Elephant says, blue has a calming influence. It's a cooler color. That's right, Annie. I would think that the red actually stimulates your survival chakra to go, maybe better eat something. You never know, you know, our genetic memory has times of food just disappearing. Better stop at that logo and fill up. I saw your question expanding the process. I'm leaving out the moon because I don't have. It doesn't work into my metaphor, and I don't want to get out of the metaphors I'm making here that are kind of part of the telestic transmission. This is still live, MC. Oh, no, it might have been one of my periods that I was out here, Elephant. Thank you. So, I'm getting ready to kind of bring this stream to a close. Yeah, I saw it. If it's something had popped into my head, I would have, just expanding, I would have shared it. I would have had to kind of, but I would have had to kind of go looking to give something, and so that's why, if it had popped up, I would have shared it, but nothing came. And you know, I've kind of traditionally kind of aimed for 2 hours, and you know, if it happens, it happens. But with a little more focus, perhaps sometimes it'll be best for me to say what I need to say, have some conversation, and then you know, and go out and stand barefoot on the grass for a while. Especially now that it warmed up. We had a cold spell. It was miserable for me. For what I really call good sleeping weather. I had to shut windows, and you know, I like fresh air. Love, you know, fresh air is chi. Give me the chi. So I'm just really enjoying it. And actually, I'll just quickly switch over because I don't hear any dogs barking, and I'm about to end the transmission anyway. The sounds of nature, without the dogs being dogs down the street. Oh yes, okay, Christian. Okay, I'd be glad to. Thank you for reminding me. Christian had asked me about the preparation I use for my hair. So it's really pretty simple. I might add some complexity to it at another time, but I can't afford the third ingredient. But the ingredient I've been using now for about 20 years when I need to. There are sometimes periods I go without it, and then all of a sudden I start experiencing hair loss and stuff, so then I use it again, the hair loss stops, my hair fills in again. So I use yarrow. Yarrow is an herb. It grows in a lot of places. It grows here. Grew up in New York. And usually if in certain fields where it grows a lot, it's all over the place. I don't have a yarrow leaf to show you. I have some dried yarrow heads, but they wouldn't really help you identify the plant. But you can yarrow, Y-A-R-R-O-W. And so what I do is I kind of basically make a very strong decoction, an herbal term for what we normally would call making a tea. A tea is a decoction. But what I do is, like, where usually like the perfect tea, you don't leave it in there, it'll get bitter. You kind of do this like after 2 or 3 minutes. In certain cases, for certain teas, you do it 30 seconds and then you take it out and that's your tea. What I do when I make this very strong tea is I really put a lot into the area, and then I put the water in there, bring that to a boil, it's covered, bring it to a boil, turn it off, and let it steep until it's cool. That could be an hour or more. And so that's my yarrow tea or decoction. And I strain that, pour it off. You can use a coffee filter for a strainer. I have a fairly fine mesh strainer, and I like for little bits of the organic material to get into there because it causes a fermentation when it gets a little bit older, which adds a slightly acidic or vinegary aspect to it, and I find that actually enhances it. It works fine when it's fresh, but that little acetic acid getting in there, which is what you have in vinegar, because vinegar has its own kind of cleansing effect. But what I do is I take that tea and then I mix it half and half with witch hazel. And you can buy, if you go into like a supermarket, they usually will have like an 8-ounce or 16-ounce bottle of witch hazel for about $2, sometimes less. Not, some witch hazels are better than other, but for this will work just fine. And so I mix 1/2 of that very strong tea. So let's say 2 ounces of that tea with 2 ounces of witch hazel. Shake and but usually sometimes I'll make up a quart at a time. In which case I'll put 16 ounces of tea if I've made it. Sometimes I've only made 8, so I'll put 8 ounces of tea and 8 ounces of witch hazel. That is it. So I do a few things with it and the way I use it. One is almost every shampoo we use is really far thicker than we need. It creates a lot more lather than I'm looking for, because I know lather isn't a minimum of lather is cleansing, because that's the saponins, but excess lather is actually hampers cleaning. So what I usually try to do is I'll pour out some of the shampoo. The real mix would be half shampoo and half of this mix, but sometimes I'll pour off a quarter, a third of the shampoo, and then mix in this rinse into that, and then I shake that. So now not only is it, now the shampoo not only has this ingredient in it as part of the shampooing process, but it also lessens the viscosity or thickness of the shampoo itself, making it more mobile. So rather than having to kind of squeeze this, it's not as thick as toothpaste, but you know how normal shampoo comes out. what you can now do is you can jigger it into your hair because it's thin enough to come through that little opening that's in most shampoo bottles. And so with my wet hair, I jigger it into my hair and I work into the lather. So I'm just jiggering in as it lathers, and when I have enough lather, I stop jiggering it in and wash my hair. And in my case, I only wash my hair once, one soaping. Then I rinse it out, squeeze the water out of my hair, and then what I do is I will put this is when the rinse goes on. I put the rinse into my scalp and work it in. I especially grab the back of my hair into a ball and I pour it into there because that's really kind of where it needs it. But the scalp is really, where the hair health comes from. So it's in between. I use a conditioner, especially with my long hair. So in between the shampoo, which in my case has some of it in there, and even if I have fresh shampoo, what I'll do is I'll put some of the fresh shampoo on, but then I want to thin it so it works its way in better. Instead of using water, I'll use the rinse. I'll pour that on me and thin the shampoo with the Yarrow Witch Hazel rinse itself. Then, rinse out the lather, put on my Yarrow Witch Hazel rinse, then apply the conditioner. And once again, sometimes the conditioner is a little thick. I usually try to put some of the same rinse in my conditioner and make it thinner. But once the conditioner's in my hair, I'll usually sprinkle a little bit more of it on there and work that in there. And then when I'm done, I rinse it out. That's it. It's made with yarrow leaves and the heads, the seed heads. The leaves are very feathery, so there's a certain hair-like quality to them. The seed head, to me, is not only does it have more essential, really where the essential oils are concentrated, but it also is symbolic of the head. And this is part of what's known as the doctrine of signature that is used in traditional herbology or herbistry, whatever you want to call it, herbal practice. So that's it. So it's half strong tea of yarrow and half witch hazel. So again, equal parts. And that is the rinse, and I use the rinse with my shampoo. I use it in between my shampoo and conditioner, and I add it both into my conditioner or to thin it. That's it. That's what I use. I cannot say that you will get the same results. I will just say that I'm not the only beneficiary. I'm not the only one who's benefited. That can be arranged, Elephant. I keep my eye out for those kinds of things because they're not common, and I want to know who really wants to use this technology for greater cohesion and information sharing, and to create real interpersonal relationships with people who in every sense except presence are real. Well, no, the thing, Christian, I'm not sure if you have thick hair. One of the reasons I use it is it's a hair thickener. That's one of the things at least that's my experience. I won't say it objectively. In my case, one of the reasons I like to use it is I find it thickens the shaft of my hair. And, it's kind of like sometimes the part, in between the parts of your hair, that part starts to get a little wider. And so in every case where I've seen that happening, and my brush just filling up with hair, and after I shampoo and it's like these clots of hair coming out, I do this treatment and it completely just fixes everything for me. Oh, thickening the shafts, not expanding the hair shafts. Well, it's to me it's a very useful herbal remedy, especially around us Well, I mean, you know, these days I don't. There is so much more I would say, but you never know what is no longer correct. And that's, you know, but it doesn't stop private transmission. But you know, public transmission, we have to be on guard. There isn't. There are a lot of people out there who thinks that that when the tech giants or corporations do what they do, that they operate with our best interests. So here it was. I thought I was going to end this before the 2-hour mark. No, but I really wasn't counting. I'm just tracking. I love the topics, Any Among Us, but again, you never know what people who are in the employ of a camp that the last thing they want you to do is to know how to use nature. They can't patent nature. Anything that's not patentable, they would like to do their best to make forbidden. If they can't forbid it outright, they'll forbid the speech around it. And if you disappear from YouTube, they'll probably think that you were saying kind things about unpopular people or something. But what you said, Any Among Us, there were a lot of things I left. As a matter of fact, when I was mowing my front lawn, there was one herb that looks to me like it's colt's foot. And so until I identify it, I didn't mow it. Because the fact that I am now smoking more than I should, colt's foot could easily come in handy to have it around. There's just a little hint in there about its agency in the body. All right. So warm greetings and warm salutations at the end. I just, this live stream will continue to be one of, again, Gnostic thought, although I can't stand the word Gnostic only because it was originally used as a pejorative. But we want to communicate. Gnostic communicates in its own wounded fashion. And so just just know that there are ponds and there are springs. They each have their charm. There's full light and there's black light. They each have their charm, lack of charm, and utility or lack of utility. And some welcome the rain and the sun, and some will sometimes curse the rain or the sun. But we need the rain and the sun, and so the rain and the sun falls upon us all, whether there's appreciation for it or not. So I want to be in line with the natural world, with Mother Nature, and provide spring water, rain, sun, and it is upon the recipient decides. It's their choice of how that is received. So anyway, May you know the Earth Goddess and her wisdom, and may you get to know her personally. And to just sit in that place of wisdom until we know what to do, and then we can have our intent informed by wisdom. Good night, all, and I just got to find my little thing here and stop streaming. Don't know how long it takes before it cuts me off, but I'll go out yakking. Oh, I'm sitting here thinking I stopped streaming, and oh, second button to hit. So anyway, that was the reason for my sign.